Thanks everyone for the introduction. As she said, we're Team LASaves from University of Southern California. My name is Adrian Lindgren. This is Brandon DeBrule, Rhett Parnay, Heidi Greenhall, and Yushui Chen. And I will now introduce Rhett. Thank you.
Over the past 15 years, severe droughts have been affecting the Southwest United States. Costs are evident in a $687 million drought relief package authorized by Governor Brown in response to what he called the worst drought in the state's modern history. As part of the drought relief state of declaration, the governor indicated a 20% reduction in voluntary consumption before more drastic measures, including a 50% price increase and mandatory limits. Costs to the economy are estimated in the billions, causing a number of social, environmental, and economic problems. These issues are overlapping and may not have a clear recourse on the proper prevention, mitigation, or adaptation responses. On screen is a satellite image comparison of California between 2013 and 2014. In just a calendar year, we can see that the water ecology of California has changed substantially. Our solution is LASaves, an online platform to make sense of large data sets of water consumption for citizens, to improve how they can track and monitor their usage, and to cultivate the right civic habits in times of drought. It leverages current tools such as apps, websites, and information campaigns with implementation strategies at a local government level. This approach is consistent with other pre-impact government interventions, as well as to cultivate the right community spirit of impacting individual-level action with neighborhood-level outcomes. In the age of big data, we see an opportunity to improve civic participation in conservation efforts, and for governments to use analytics in improving social service provision. Our overarching goal is to improve the accessibility and ease of use of billing data. We will do this with web and email texting campaigns to improve alerts and benchmark notification. These benchmarks are based on past consumption precedents and also local governments' water management policies. These will be complemented with infographics depicting changes in consumption from previous billing periods, as well as cost savings from expected consumption reductions. We expect LASaves to have important outcomes in short, medium, and long-term timeframes. By the end of 2014, we will continue to develop our materials and implement a pilot program in San Gabriel Valley Municipal Water District. We will be able to provide citizens data regarding their consumption and targeted benchmarks. Between now and the end of 2015, we will expect to have individual results aggregated at a community level, and we'll expect to find other partners in local and other Southern California local governments. Beyond 2015, we may expect our program to be adopted by Los Angeles Department of Water and Power and other major proprietary city agencies. Additionally, we will be able to cultivate public goodwill by improving the ability for citizens to access data that is meaningful to them and to improve the utility management methods of local governments across Southern California. Heidi will now discuss the innovation, stakeholders, and expected timelines of LASaves.
Thank you, Rhett. LASaves is innovative in 4 ways. First, it's model transfer from the energy sector. When the energy sector faced a crisis in the early 2000s, they integrated text messaging systems as well as an easy-to-understand web-based billing system that helped consumers better understand how they were utilizing their energy. This resulted in high levels of conservation. Second of all, the program is highly adaptive to any levels of government necessary. Unfortunately, the drought is not only affecting Los Angeles County, but the entire western United States. As such, LASaves can be adapted to other municipalities as well as state level and regional level governments as needed. Thirdly, it is extremely easy to use for consumers. LASaves is designed based on systems that consumers usually use, such as text-based or web-based alert systems. What LASaves will do is integrate the information from the water companies and put them into an easy-to-understand system so that consumers can better understand how they're using their water and lead to conservation. Finally, LASaves is preparing for an extremely uncertain future. The drought has been stated that could last anywhere from approximately a few years to 200 years. LASaves is an extremely cost-effective system that is easy to implement and can be adapted to even tier-based billing systems if they become necessary in the future. In terms of our stakeholders, it's not only the regional governments that we mentioned that are affected, but also counties, water districts, consumers, and utility commissions. In addition, states outside of California are affected by this because if we save water in LA County, it will also preserve the resources of the Colorado River. Our two primary stakeholders are the San Gabriel Valley Municipal Water District and water consumers for our pilot program. The San Gabriel Valley Municipal Water District serves approximately 200,000 people in 4 cities. They have expressed that they are creating a pilot program to gain data at the neighborhood level, but have yet decided how to reach consumers. When approached with LASave, they expressed great interest. Water consumers will be immediately affected because they will have better access to their information, so more transparency, as well as the ability to control their water use. We estimate that this will immediately lead to public goods in terms of conservation, as well as private goods in lower water utility bills. Our campaign plan will involve 3 stages. The first is development, which has already begun. The second will be implementation, which will begin in July of this year, and will also include a public outreach campaign that involves outreaching using public affairs and public areas, including flyers and water bills. And finally, we will have an evaluation to follow up with the citizens to see how they are adjusting to the new system. I will now pass it off to Emily Yishui Chen to discuss our budget and financing.
Thank you, Heidi. Our budget was based on estimates of utilizing research of similar projects. Costs are based upon estimates from the California Urban Water Conservation Council. We have 2 programs that have been costed to meet the needs of our water information campaign. Part 1 is a pilot program. Conversations with our key stakeholder, San Gabriel Valley Municipal Water District, has indicated that we can approach approximately 12,840 households initially. And Part 2 will be future project supervision, including website maintenance, inquiries, continuing education, and advertising to be expanded into the existing employee responsibilities in both the information technology and public relations department. As estimated, our pilot program will cost around $59,000 for the first year and $52,000 for the annual maintenance. And if we expand the program to the full San Gabriel Valley Municipal Water District, it will cost around $920,000 for first year. And as population goes up, the cost will increase smoothly. Based on conversations with stakeholders as well as research conducted by us, initial funds will come from a combination of grants and stakeholder funding. And our funding strategy is centered on innovation grants from the water authorities of Southern California, local municipalities, and the state of California. The seed money would account for around 8% of the total funding. In addition, there will be a list of top possible sources for funding that our program may be eligible for, in addition to the original seed fund. Through these additional fundings in our seed fund, we can reach up to $352,000, which will definitely cover the startup cost of our pilot program. LASaves is a very low-cost approach to minimize the financial costs of excessive water usage and the drought. Compared to the existing alternatives, it is much more efficient in water usage savings and costs much less. Thank you. And then Heidi will wrap up.
In conclusion, the drought is an extremely urgent matter. As you can see from this photograph, a lake in California 3 years ago was flourishing and today barely exists. LASaves is an innovative, low-cost, and easy-to-implement program that will aid and bring consumers as becoming partners in this urgent matter, and we thank you for your consideration.
We're now happy to take questions.
Yes. Well, I'm the least shy of the four up here. When you're talking about this, and clearly, you know, one of the things I like about this is its adaptability, its scalability, and ease of use. But as you've been talking about this, what all, as a team, did you identify as your single largest barrier to the success of the program? And what are you doing about it?
I think the largest barrier we face is with perception within the public realm. Water is seen as an accepted tool that we all use and consume without conscious effort. So identifying the idea that this is something that needs to be thought about in the process of trying to save water is important. And we've looked at the psychology of how people consider different usages, and this is why we went to the power sector and we looked at what the power sector did, because in about 1998, I believe this was a similar thing. People just used power, they didn't think about energy savings, and there's quite a bit of overlap in how people think about using utility resources and how that can transfer to water savings as well. So that's where we thought that the general problem would be with identifying the biggest barrier, and then when we thought about it, we thought the energy sector is the best place to look.
The essence of the program, as I see it here, is basically you are trying to inform the consumer how much water they have used. So why is it that they don't know now?
That is a fantastic question.
This has been something that was interesting to us when we approached the director and one of the board members of the San Gabriel Valley Municipal Water District. He explained that one of the issues with water is that people respond to either crisis or to knowledge. And currently, the knowledge is not really there. People get their bills about every 2 months. They don't tell you much information in the same way that you might see that your energy bill does. And the other thing he observed is that they've never shut off water in California and really anywhere. We've been accustomed to brownouts, so that's given people a sense of urgency and a sense of crisis. But I think what we're trying to do is figure out ways that we can convey that urgency without bringing it to a crisis situation. So I think we focus on knowledge in order to kind of enhance people's ability to relate to the problem overall.
But if I may follow up, isn't this the so-called commons dilemma is where people generally think that, there is a problem, but usually it's somebody else who is going to save, not me. And two, that after all, how much would I use?
One of the things that we identified was that the billing structure presented by multiple water authorities and multiple water companies is fairly poor at communicating actual usage. So you will be given only percentage fundings or very small metrics to measure yourself against the community. One of the things that we wanted to do is, in our billing process, provide clear indicators of where you stand with the community and how you relate to them. So that would give you a little bit better sense of how much you're using. In terms of how to get the entire community to save together, once people start realizing in aggregate how much the community is using and how much of it is waste, which we can also identify on the billing process, people will start taking notice, like, I don't want to spend 12 gallons of water on my rose bushes when it's going to cost me $25 extra a month. Things like that. They can make different choices in how they plant plants or take showers or what type of utilities they put in their house when they do a renovation, things like that, that can save them money in the long run. So that there's a cost incentive that we built into this that would help them better select water usage choices.
Thank you.
Can you tell us a little bit more about what the platform will look like, specifically how you'll get data from the water board and how that data will go back out to the individuals, also how you came up with the cost estimate, and whether or not you think it's possible to build all this by July 1?
Yes.
Start with budgeting.
So we'll start with budget and then move into maybe how we'll go through the institutional process. With the budget, we looked at similar programs within the energy sector to identify what their timelines looked like. And we came up with a similar timeline based upon that background research. We then took those calculations and plugged them into some pretty normal private sector kind of approaches and came up with a 0-point model and then identified a statistical relationship, which we can see as lambda. And then once that was brought down to a mu, we could then figure out how many households we would need to target in order to reach a place where we could take z-scores and figure out probabilities of distributions. So that's how we would then figure out the economics of it. So it's a pretty straightforward calculation from that point. In terms of how we would get operating, the systems are already in place. San Gabriel Valley has already started deploying smart meters, and I believe they have to meet that requirement by July 1 already. So that was part of our decision to identify that date. Second, we're using a Nixle program to outreach to people, and those systems have been in place in California, I believe, since 2001. So there are infrastructure pieces that are already in place that we will be utilizing in the deployment of this.
Part of it is we're also trying to build off of some recent funding that's been given by the state of California after the declaration of emergency. And billions of dollars have been given out to municipal water districts to implement smart metering systems. San Gabriel has, as you saw, about over 12,000 houses. They've gone in and starting to implement all of those smart metering systems. But they really haven't figured out the most effective way yet to reach their consumers with that information. So when we approached them, we tried to kind of use technology to kind of apply it and fill that gap.
I remember I got to hear y'all yesterday, and you told me that these district boards that operate all these various districts or authorities, they're elected. They are elected by the voters of California, yes. which is so the people that are going to be raising their rates are answerable to voters, and they're going to be implementing these. I'm sure that presents challenges. How do you deal with something like that? Since that just baffles me.
So one of the struggles of the water districts has been that, they're not energy, they're not really for-profit, they're reliable to the public and they're accountable to the public. And so it's been difficult to introduce things like price hikes. And additionally, it's been particularly difficult to start persuading people of the kind of infrastructure investments that are going to need to come up that would put to voter measures. So part of what I think was attractive to the board was that this is a chance for them to demonstrate that accountability, to increase their transparency, especially in the face of declining service reviews. And I think they're actually eager to build that public component because at this point, the public perceives them really not very well and doesn't have much of a relationship with them. And for public officials, that's been a big detractor from, I think, their general mission.
And then with this various data you're collecting, you'll be able to show consumer usage compared to their neighbors. Will also help spot what I'm going to call waste just from inefficient systems or leakage, the loss of leakage.
One of the great challenges of our system is that it's about 60 years out of date, all of our pipes in our water system, and it's thus subject to a lot of leakages, which where a lot of the waste comes from. But what's also difficult is that there are enormous costs associated with information gathering about those problems. So rather than having someone go out to every neighborhood and try and identify every pipe that is leaking or what neighborhoods are suffering the most from leaking pipes, when you compile that data, you can take kind of a trend identification and analytics that will allow you to say, okay, if this neighborhood is using twice as much water as the neighborhood next to it, is that probably because they're actually using that much more water, or is that because there's a leak on that block? And it kind of hones in for the public utilities and public works projects where to go, where to really get that critical point of intervention from an infrastructural standpoint.
I have two additional issues here. One is, the sophistication of the consumer at the lower level, where you may not have as much usage of computers or even availability of computers. How do you accommodate that group of consumers? And second, if I were to tag along, is that what would happen if you have a multi-housing system, say 100 apartments in one complex, and there is only one bill?
So to first speak to the challenge of reaching people who maybe are not accessible to the technology services, we're using Nixle is a very low-end connectivity. So all you need is a cell phone or receive any type of Nixle alert, and that includes certain billboards and different things like that. We may have a system in place by the end of the second or third year in which there could be water alerts by district. So you would get a notification across the district that this is a water alert, that this is a low water time, people need to start conserving and saving. So there are ways to reach people with this information that are beyond just the handheld device. The handheld device allows us to provide more information to the consumer who wants to know. And oftentimes, informed consumers are people who will want to learn more once they learn a little bit. So we're going to hopefully feed that desire to know more. We're also hoping that they'll end up looking at their bills. This is something that has been challenging in most utility companies, is there's never an assurance that people look at their bill. So we want to structure it so that there is valuable information on the bill so that they can engage it, so they can see cost savings, they can see relationships, and that's the point of contact. As far as multi-housing units go, one of the things that we have definitely considered is looking at breakdown by apartment usage and breakdown by other usages. But those would be partnerships or relationships we'd have to build with the owners of the property. In part because of the California water laws structure, they have rights over who gets what water in those systems. So that ends up becoming more of a connection or a legal question than an actual capability one.
In terms of our target area, I think something to observe is they are systems in order to monitor multifamily housing. In the particular area that we're targeting, there actually happens to be a lot of single-family homes, so this kind of struck us as the most logical first step.
Okay. And if I were to follow up, the savings, I understand that you would convey each billing period that this is how much you saved. However, there is a marginal utility of saving. In other words, if I were a poor household, saving, say, $50 means a lot. But, if I'm relatively affluent, and I would assume that most people in San Francisco would qualify for that, saving $100 is not that big a deal. So then, am I not basically penalizing the people at the lower end?
Part of what we recognize as problematic with the system is that you are set to penalize people at the lower end right now. The way that billing works, it's not like energy, you don't have multiple tier structures, and so you don't charge high energy users for more money. Part of what I think will happen to the water districts and what they're planning to implement will be a multi-tiered structure based on usage. Part of the reason we've targeted this area is because it's a fairly low income area, you can see about $25,000 per capita. So we wanted to look at an area that really needs this service the most. We didn't feel like there was necessarily a point in going to Beverly Hills and trying to get them to participate first. We want to make sure that we're targeting the people who need it most, and also recognizing that Los Angeles County is it's a struggling county, and there are about 30% of people are living below the poverty line, and it would be a place that people really need these savings. And without kind of introducing the idea of new pricing and this, out of the other, I think we will end up unintentionally targeting low-income populations just because we're not recognizing that we need to charge everyone differently.
Well, it's Southern California, so all you have to do is make it trendy and fashionable.
We're going to target celebrities, so.
Well, get them to retweet their
Exactly.
savings bills out there. But what other kind of overall publicity would you use to get people to? I mean, you've got a target group of 12,800 some that you're going to start with, but don't you want to try to create a demand for others to want to be able to have the service as well?
I think one of our initial steps will be to partner with community events. There are a fair number that go on in these areas, largely because they're family areas. And so one of our big public outreach, in order to launch this campaign in terms of the billing and the reforms to the billing system, I think it's important to draw attention to the fact that this is being implemented. So we really want to target both community events and different kinds of community partners who can help us push this idea forward and really get our name out there and let people know that, we're coming to you to help you save on your bills. We're coming to you to help convey the crisis that's going on. And, we are a partner, and please take a look at your water bill next month.
So I think the idea of a pilot is great, and you make a really good case for why San Gabriel's a good place for that. Can you tell us more about sort of what outcomes you'd want to see in the pilot to prove that it's a good idea going forward? And what are the outcomes based on a precedent of services like this?
So I think the primary precedents that we're looking at, as we said, is energy, which they've shown that that interaction with data and with your billing information has been tremendously helpful in driving a consumer-driven transition into the renewable energy sector. So that's really where the precedent is. Now, there have also been pilot programs in California, including in Oakland. Recently, they just completed a one-year pilot program where they saw on average 5 to 10% savings in conservation just by providing people with their data and giving them a breakdown of how they compare to their neighbors. So that's our first goal is the compounded energy savings also. If your sewage and water are tied together, if you reduce your water usage, your sewage bill goes down. If you use less water, your energy bill goes down. So you kind of have this tremendous, as we say, compounded cost savings. And that's also going to help us meet we really want to meet the voluntary cuts and the mandatory cuts that will be in place in intermediate. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.